Hello, Internet, and welcome back to Dungeons and Dragons with Lightning God. This is a continuation story of my previous video, so go check it out to get caught up on the story and the lore. When we last left off, we had again split our party in two, but this time my character was staying at the tavern with Shima and Donovan, while Lavalley led the others to go talk with the other librarian who had witnessed one of the disappearances. You might have missed it last session, but Lavalley took a look at the book that Aldrin's apprentice on the expedition wrote. I only mentioned it in passing because I didn't think anything of it until this moment. On the way to the other librarian, Lavalley started to look through the book and it was filled with a bunch of highly dangerous and highly illegal forbidden spells. It wasn't a spell book per se, but it was more of a history and description of the spells, but it was still very troubling. Lavalley rolled a 21 on his intelligence check to actually start understanding the theory behind some of the contents, and then found that a whole small chapter of the book was torn out and replaced with fake pages. The chapter on a form of magic banned over 400 years ago was called flesh warping. Enya immediately rolled a history check and went, "Oh yeah, I heard about that. It's really fucked up. You cut a piece of a magical creature out and ritually graft it onto another creature to grant some of the magical creature's powers to the recipient. It's one of the most insidious forms of blood magic." Needless to say, everyone was a little jumpy and they all sprinted to the next witness. They knocked on the witness's door, and after he let them in, Lavalley asked if they knew of anyone who had taken the book out of the library or looked at it. And the young wizard rolled a 20 on an intelligence memory check and said that the last two people to look at the book were the town's midwife and herbalist. Around the time the disappearances started happening, Enya then asked him to describe the disappearance he saw. The young wizard told them that the disappearances were actually more like kidnappings, and they saw two people in the mist, one guiding the other with a small creature in their hands. The witness said that they were headed towards the farmland to the west of town near where Lavalley had searched that one time, which is why it was funny that in the first session. Lavalley panicked and told Kylus and Pallas to meet up with us at the tavern and relay what they had learned while they went back to the librarian for answers. And thus began the descent into madness. When Lavalley and Enya got back to the library, they informed Allrund about the missing pages and demanded to know exactly when and who would access the book, which was in a restricted section of the library. Allrund was furious he hadn't noticed the pages had been swapped and vehemently complied with the investigation. He pulled out a giant scroll of names and people and pointed to one weak on the list. Both Constance, the midwife, and Buttonwood, the herbalist, had looked at the book on different days. The three of them started to freak the fuck out, as both Constance and Buttonwood had reasons to interfere with the war camp nearby that the expedition was sent to deal with. Buttonwood had 3 sons in the expedition force, and Constance was caring for several pregnant women who had husbands on it. On top of that, Buttonwood was a powerful enough witch to figure out how flesh warping worked from the apprentice's book. Lavalley asked why Allrund's apprentice would write such a book, and Allrund said it was to educate and prevent those sort of things from being used again. After that, Enya and Lavalley booked it out of the library to meet back up with us. While that was happening, Kylus and Pallas got back to the tavern where the group therapy session was still happening, and my character was doing his best to ignore it. Everyone was petting Butters and Revy, so Donovan had to crawl out to get from out of the pile. We left the tavern to talk outside, and the two of them filled us in. When my character heard about flesh warping, he said a curse in Latin and made the sign of Pharasma on his chest. By the way, this is the symbol of Pharasma, and my character has it on his necklace. Anyway, we decided to split up again. What could go wrong, right? Right? Kylus and Pallas decided to go check on where the last victim had been headed out to the fields, while my character, Donovan, and Shima went to talk to the midwife. Along the way to the hospital, Shima asked my character how my family was doing. I told her they had been struck by lightning, and they were at peace with Pharasma in the great beyond. Out of character, Lavalley's player was like, "My gosh, the gods just said, like, nope, you don't get to live anymore." When we arrived at the hospital, I used detect magic and found several normal types of magic you would find at a hospital. So there was nothing suspicious to me about it. There were 3 pregnant women in some of the beds, and we could see some of the people from the tavern who I forgot to mention last time. So basically, there were people at the tavern who were worshippers of Pharasma because they work at the hospital and made a connection with me because I displayed my symbol of Pharasma. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to use this connection in any meaningful way because of the following scene. Constance saw us walk in and said, "Oh," when she saw Shima. Shima is apparently the subject of a notorious tall tale among midwives, as her backstory is that she was blessed by Esriel, her patron god, with triplets when she was already pregnant with twins, leading to sextuplets. Anyway, the conversation started off well enough. Shima cast a spell of truth, which meant everyone in a 30-foot radius had to tell the truth. We had to cast saving dice rolls in order to not be affected. I rolled high enough, but Donovan didn't, so he decided to start looking around so he wouldn't have to talk. We started off asking Constance some basic investigator questions like, why were you looking at a book of forbidden spells? When I asked this, Lavalley's player let out a grinding noise with his teeth, so I guess it was bad to be up front in an investigation. Constance said there were certain spells in there that we could learn from that had properties that could heal people, which wasn't too bad of an answer if you ask me. When she talked about the apprentice, she talked as if she knew he was already dead. I questioned why she said it like that, and she said there's just no way to know, and started tearing up. I got very excited about this. You see, between sessions, I had asked our DM if I was able to communicate with Pharasma due to my backstory. It would make sense if I could at least ask if someone was dead or alive, or how they were doing in the afterlife. The DM agreed and was setting me up for just such an event. My character told Constance that he could communicate with Pharasma, and I could ask if the apprentice was alive. And Constance said, "You can commune with a lady of graves?" Suddenly, Shima just straight up asked what Constance knew about flesh warping. Everyone at the table freaked the fuck out, asking why the hell Shima's player would ask that. Shima tried to do a saving diplomacy check, but rolled a natural 1. She still tried to save it by saying one of her kids was doing a research project, but Constance did not buy that. Constance's hands was visibly shaking in fury as she said, "I am the midwife here at this town, and my patron is Pharasma. I have women depending on me for aid while their husbands are out fighting, not knowing for their return, and you dare accuse me of something as horrible as flesh warping?" I was like, yeah, I'm going to try and save this disaster of a conversation. Fuck! I rolled a natural 1 as well, and my character angrily told Shima that flesh warping was akin to heresy under the patronship of Pharasma, and is one of the most horrible crimes to accuse her of. I tried to apologize for Shima, but Constance was now mad at both of us. While we were getting a verbal and mental beatdown, Donovan had free rein to look around the single-floored hospital. He rolled a 26 for perception check and found a drawer half open with a regular cookbook, a map that the route the militia expedition was going on, and 2 vials of Blackfinger salt. After a successful knowledge check, he remembered that Blackfinger salt was a very deadly and brutal poison. It was colorless, tasteless, and its symptoms were severe internal bleeding and lesions along the digestive tract. He managed to tuck all of the stuff into his pouch, including the cookbook for some reason, just as Constance turned around and kicked us all out, fortunately without seeing him steal the stuff. He told us about what he found as we were leaving, and well out of earshot. While that train wreck was happening, Kylus and Pallas were standing watch by the fields where all of the past victims had apparently been taken off to. They rolled perception checks, and while Kylus got a 13 and was tricked by the night scenery and the rustic charm of the town, Pallas, who is a perception god, rolled a total of 33. Because of that, Pallas got to hear the shouting coming from the hospital, see Enya and Lavalley flipping shit through the windows of the library, and notice that, hey, there's a boulder right next to us on that hill that doesn't look like it ought to be there. The situation was explained comedically, casually to Kylus, and the 2 adventure-loving ladies who hadn't really had the time to shine yet went to explore the unusual rock. It was now time for us out of character to flip our shit, because I believe the phrase, "Oh God, we put the two devil-may-cry meatheads together," was uttered at one point. When they got there, Palace immediately recognized the rock as a secret door and unlocked it with ease, but then they had to figure out how to open it, and it was heavy enough to simulate a real rock. Palace rolled a 10 strength check and couldn't get it to budge, so Kylus gave it a try and got a 21, tearing it up off the sliding rock up and tearing the rock up off the sliding tracks as it was mounted to, and casually tossing it 30 feet to the side. Kylus lit her torch lantern and gave it to Palace, who went first to check for traps. They find and disable both of them, and each were very complex and would have done 4d6 damage of slashing and bludgeoning damage, respectively. For those who don't know, that could easily kill any of our party instantly. They get to a door, unlock it, and find themselves in a cellar. The secret door opens behind a massive barrel of vinegar, obscuring it from view of the stairs that lead down to the cellar. The two of them find bread and cheese, and for some reason make themselves some sandwiches. As they're munching on their frickin' suspect's food, they see a bookshelf in the storage cellar, which they kind of agree is kind of weird. At this point, out of character, our whole table was cracking up. They work together to open the secret bookshelf door, and when they do, they emerge into the laboratory with an alchemist's workbench, a surgical table with shackles bolted to the floor at all four corners, a bloodied surgical equipment, and an empty St. Andrew's cross, and an arcane book on the stand in a large wooden chest. They collectively agree to check out the chest first. Palace fails to unlock it, so Kylus breaks out her frickin' portable battering ram. While Kylus is doing that, Palace looks at the book on the stand. Kylus busts the chest open and finds the armor and weapons of the missing members of the town militia. Palace realizes that sitting on top of the book are missing pages from the flesh-warping chapter of the librarian's student's dissertation. While this treasure trove of evidence is being found, LaValle's player was rubbing his forehead, saying, "All of my hard work," and they stumble on the mountain of evidence by sheer dumb luck. It's at this point where our DM asks them whether they've closed the doors behind them. They both say yes. Both secret doors are closed, and he informs them that the secret bookshelf door is soundproofed, so if they hadn't closed it, they'd be in combat right now. That's not terrifying at all. They gather all their evidence up and make one last sweep of the room, where they find a cellar door made of a simple iron grate. Behind it, they see a very tall, gaunt, and horribly scarred figure chained to another St. Andrew's cross in the cell. Opposite, from 3 empty cages, conveniently one for each of the militia troops that had disappeared in the mist. The creature itself was visibly tortured, in pain, and had chunks of its flesh cut out. Now, the two of them had no idea what the hell this thing is, because they aren't spellcasters. But when we arrive next session, that thing is going to be terrifying for my character. For whatever reason, they try to talk to the figure, but they don't do so well since they took this post specifically because they're not people. It stares at them and breathes out the fear-inducing, wisdom-damage-dealing, haunting mist that was the key thing connecting every disappearance. Palace rolls a saving throw, and while Kylus doesn't, she takes minimum damage. Palace pulls her out of the mist, and Kylus recovers, but in order to try and enter the room, they'll have to pass through it again. They make their saves this time, break down the cell door with the battering ram since the mist is too thick to see the lock properly, and while Palace unlocks it from the creature from the cross, Kylus tries to talk to it again. Out of character, we are once again in a panic as we don't know what this thing is or what it can do. Now that it's been set free and treated with compassion, the creature immediately decides that they're friends, and agrees to leave with them after Palace mentions they have a friend who's a mom. The creature seems very attached to the name Mom and says it repeatedly as it starts to absorb glowing golden orbs of magic in the air around it, and visibly grows stronger as it says, "Mama is here." As they help the 7-foot-tall creature out of the cell, they hear footsteps coming down the other side of the wall. Our DM ominously says A wooden chest bursting is one thing, but the smashing down of an iron grate is another. They were overheard. Meanwhile, all caps, separate line, the rest of us met back up and shared our various discoveries and decided that the herbalist should be the prime suspect, but the midwife also needs to be arrested as an accomplice. Earlier, my character made a good enough perception roll to see the rock being chucked in the air, and I sent Revi after them. I used share senses to tell the party that Kylus and Pallas found a secret tunnel that leads to the herbalist's house. As soon as I said that, Lavalley and Enya book it towards the Buttonwood's house, and the rest of us follow. I use Fly to keep up and get an aerial view as Shima mounts Butters, intending to smash through Buttonwood's front door. Lavalley casts True Strike on Butters, which boosts the damage before the ram is about to hit the door. Just as Buttonwood starts to open the bookshelf door, with Kylus and Pallas half carrying the tormented creature that neither of them know enough about magically to identify, the front door of his house is smashed to splinters. Lavalley shouts at the top of his lungs, "Harold Buttonwood, you are under arrest!" as our party spills onto the scene. It's at this point the DM ends the session, as it's 12 a.m., and Donovan's player calls him a bastard with a smile on his face. I hope you guys are just as excited for the next video as me, because it's the climactic battle of the century. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching. Like and subscribe if you want more content like this, and I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye!